Hello everybody and welcome to Forever Rugby on Forever Sports for today's weekly wrap-up of the rugby news in the world this week. Just a couple of the major headlines. Obviously can't cover all the news because there's just too much. A lot of rugby being played. We've got Super Rugby underway. This weekend is full of Premiership, Top 14, Pro 14. We've got the preparation series underway in South Africa, which will return on Tuesday and Wednesday. We will be live for them as well, so keep an eye on which sort of matches will be live. But yeah, so much rugby going on that this is just a wrap-up of some of the top sort of news in the rugby world with a focus on South African rugby. As always, before we get into the headlines, please do smash a like on the video. Do subscribe to the channel as well. We are over 1,000 subscribers, so the next is to try and sort of hit 1,500, and try and build up from there. Thank you for everybody who has subscribed so far, and please do continue showing your support. Right, so in terms of the headlines, a very interesting week. We've seen some developments and we've seen some non-developments. Not much in the way of clarity regarding, the British and Irish Lions or even sort of Six Nations, what's happening. We did a video on Wednesday talking about how there is a date that's currently being talked about for the Scotland versus France catch-up match on the 26th of March. And nothing's been confirmed yet, but it does look like they are trying to get that match played in this sort of window, even if it's outside the usual test window itself. But in terms of sort of the top sort of stories that we've noticed over the week, we're going to start with the SA Rugby Awards. Dwayne Vermeulen was named the Player of the Year. I mean, a massive achievement for him, but really well deserved. He's just such a stalwart, the definition of a stalwart player, and he's everything. He's absolutely everything for the Bulls. He's experienced. He's he's physical. He's a big ball carrier. He's great in defense. He brings everything you would want in a rugby player. Is what Dwayne Vermeulen is. You really cannot talk more to the ability of the player. And he beat the likes of Curran Bosch, Cornel Hendricks, Stephen Kitsop, and Frans Steyn. So he was in very, very good company. But he was named the Player of the Year. And then SA Rugby Young Player of the Year, very happy about this as a Lions fan. Want to see the Simelane. What an exciting talent he is. Beating out Curran Bosch, Stephen Gans, Ruan Nokia, and Dylan Richardson, all players who I think definitely have a future in the green and gold. Want to see the Simelane being singled out as the best young player of the year, which I think is very well deserved. Lions side with lots of inexperience, lots of exciting players. He really has stood head and shoulders above the rest in terms of just pure talent. Attacking talent. Somebody very, very different to what we're used to seeing in South Africa. We're almost seeing a different breed of players in many ways. As these sort of players are starting to come through, we're seeing players who have got better skill sets, who might, be able to use their size a bit more effectively. We're seeing how Ches and Colby is showing that, size everything. Want to see a Simelane, somebody a bit like that. Not necessarily a Jacques Free in terms of just sheer size, hard running, but, very quick off the mark, very skillful, can spot a gap, can get the offloads in. A very, very interesting player. Somebody who I think will probably be very good in the Sevens circuit. Speaking of Sevens players of the year, Stedman Hunt was recognized as the Springbok Sevens player of the year. He beat out Angelo Davids and Sullivan Davids. So, I mean, Stedman Hunt, best Sevens player in the country at the moment, and I thought was terrific at outside centre for Bulls as well. Very interested to see where he thinks his future is. We've got the Olympics this year in terms of the Sevens opportunities. Will he be trying to push, to try and stay with the Bulls and try and start building a case to try and be included in a Springbok squad in the upcoming year or two? It's a big decision on his plate, but very nice to be in that position where you can sit there saying, well, do I want to represent my country in this team or that team potentially? Because I do think that he has the ability to potentially do both. And then Team of the Year was obviously the Bulls, and they beat out the Chelsea Sharks and the Springbok Sevens. I mean, difficult for the Sevens. They didn't get to finish, their series. We're looking pretty good. Had some moments, had some bad moments. A bit of a transition period for the side, but some very talented players there. Coach of the Year was Jake White, beating out Sean Everett and Neil Powell, as we would expect. And Super Rugby Unlocked and Super Rugby and Player of the Year was Dwayne Vermeulen. He beat out Frans Steyn and Marco van Staden. Frans Steyn obviously more for his for Super Rugby Unlocked performances, not playing in Super Rugby at the beginning of the year. And Marco van Staden, who's currently one of the best loose forwards in the country. Finally, the last two awards, Currie Cup Player of the Year was Cornel Hendricks. So chuffed for him. The best story you could ever think of. Almost career ending from Springbok to not even playing rugby because of a heart condition. He had to really go through the motions, from club rugby to playing, reserve rugby, and now, the starting inside centre, making a positional switch, doing in and above all of that to, help the Bulls claim to back-to-back titles in SA, and really is making that position his own. Referee of the Year could only have been Jaco Paper. In a time where I think, SA referees are under a lot of scrutiny, he continues to be a shining light, continues to be a very, very competent man with the whistle in the middle, and we need more players in the mold of him, so that we can get back to sort of a very high standard of officiating in the country. Second up, we've got the Under-20 Trophy this year has been called off. There will be no Under-20 Championship this year, which is really, really frustrating. Not frustrating. I can understand why. Very disappointing, though, because I love the tournament. I think it's so good to see, the next generation. And, often some of these players do make it, some of them don't. But it's always very interesting to see, what the next crop of players can do. And what's also very interesting is often in these sort of Under-20 tournaments, it's not always dominated by, your usual suspects. You can have some very good Argentinian teams. You can have some, suddenly some very good, Italian players and all these different players. And a lot of times you can see players who might represent certain countries at Under-20 level that might not actually eventually go on to represent that country in senior levels. But it is, it's a tournament where players who are young trying to prove themselves, just very hungry. And it's often a very good standard of rugby. We've seen some class performances over the year and a really cool tournament. So guts that we won't be seeing that, but hopefully we'll see that next year. What we will be seeing for this year is the HSBC Sevens returning in what's going to be a very different calendar, but something that probably needed in terms of just spicing things up a little bit, bringing a little bit more sort of interest to the game. And it's going to be sort of quite well spread over the year. We've obviously got the Olympics, which will feature sevens, and that has to come into play. The Olympics currently scheduled for July, beginning of August, similar time as the British and Irish Lions Tour. So certain sevens players, will have to choose. If the Lions Tour goes ahead there, I'm sure that somebody like a Ches and Colby would love to have him at the Olympics, but he's probably going to choose the British and Irish Lions Tour. So some of the players might be in a position where they have to kind of choose. Somebody like Tico Mozanoche is really pushing for the SA call up. He probably also has half an eye on playing in the Olympics potentially. So that does make things a bit complicated. But in terms of the actual series, so we're gonna have two women's tournaments. Paris, based in Paris on the 15th and 16th of May and the 22nd and 23rd of May. The men's series, however, will only begin in September. So unfortunately, no rugby before the Olympics for the sevens players. It'll start with the London series, which is scheduled for sometime in September. We're then going to have a Singapore. We're going to start with the Canada series, which is in sometime in September, and then London, which hasn't been confirmed yet. The Singapore Sevens will take place on the last weekend of October before they move to Hong Kong. Then they're going to have the Dubai event, Hong Kong, Dubai, and then Cape Town. Cape Town will be the last event of the year. We'll try our best to actually get there and try and bring you some coverage on the ground. Where you're very, very cool. If we can't get the Lions Tour, at the very least, we could try and get the Cape Town Sevens. That will be on the 10th to 12th of December. The last few tournaments will be both women's and men's tournaments running simultaneously. So very cool to see sevens back on our screens. And then finally, a very interesting story with the Rainbow Cup looming in April. No official sort of fixtures being released yet. Nothing concrete apart from the fact that it is supposed to be going ahead. But you haven't had any final confirmation. We're trying to get all the other competitions out the way before they can kind of gauge exactly what's going to happen with the Rainbow Cup. And what's particularly problematic in terms of the way that they are organizing the tournament is what to do with the South African side. Can we have sides from the Pro 14 coming to South Africa and playing in South Africa? And there's now a story that the SA teams will be based outside of South Africa, potentially in Dubai or even based in the UK, or Ireland. So that's where they'll be based. So there's less traveling. And I can understand to a degree why, because, logistically it makes things a lot easier. But, I also think you've got to look at it in consideration. You've got to look at where South Africa is moving towards. I understand that in, the UK is supposed to be getting a lot better because, the mass vaccine rollout, which is one of the reasons why the British and Irish Lions Tour is looking to go to the UK. But, right now, if you can successfully host somebody like Pakistan coming to the country, and having these tours. I understand it's a bit different because you go into sort of quarantine period and stuff like that, but that's something you need to try and look at. Can we have a situation where players can arrive, these players can go straight into a bubble, play the game, and go out? In a similar way that we're seeing teams move around Europe, in like Champions League and stuff like that. Can that be implemented on a bit of a longer scale for these teams? The problem is, as I said, because it's a weekly sort of week-on-week tournament. There's no real time for quarantine period. There's a lot of worry about the whole new variant. But it would be a very big ask for the SA teams to go and be based somewhere else. They've already had to spend, a lot of time sometimes in the biobubbles away from family and stuff like that. They're now going to be asked, Springbok players could be asked, we need you to go and be based in April. from April based overseas, and you won't be available to come back to South Africa until the end of the Lions tour, which is in August. So it's quite a big ask, to take players from their families and say, right, we need you to spend 5 months, overseas. I understand that it's one of the things that the situation demands, but we talk about player welfare, and that is a major part. In an environment, in a situation where we've been so, it's such a big emphasis on the fact of what really matters and the fact that family has to come first. We've seen players, suddenly realize that, making changes in terms of the teams or where they're going to be based. Some players coming back for family, some players moving over to protect their family in terms of financially. It's quite a big ask to expect these players to be able to say, right, well, we're going to leave our family, we're going to enter a bio bubble, not see anybody for months on end. We've seen a lot of cricketers come out and say that they really, really struggle with the whole idea of the bio bubble, of just not seeing their friends, not seeing their family, and sort of the mental toll it takes. But that is another story that is doing the rounds as well, the British and Irish Lions. So we will keep you up to date on whatever sort of happens there. Lots of other stories floating around. Something that's quite interesting was seeing Jason Colby playing at fly half last weekend, doing a lot of changes there. Some interesting stuff happening in the Super Rugby. So Aaron Smith extending his contract with the All Blacks for another 2 years, which is a big sign of intent from them. So lots of stuff happening in the Rugby World, which is very cool. We obviously can't cover all of it, but we will try and cover as much as we can. We'll be live tonight for Leinster versus Ulster. Should be really, really cool. Want to try and start watching a bit more Pro 14 as we gear up towards the Rainbow Cup and hopefully the Pro 16 after that. Please do smash a like on the video, subscribe to the channel as well. My name is Stephen, and I'll chat to you soon.